Welcome to another chapter on outdoor living, designing those spaces within SoftPlan. To date, we have been taking time to lay out custom decks, railing options. We've taken in the last chapter the opportunity to sketch out a screened-in porch, adding a roof to the screened-in porch, and then also laying in the vertical structural members through the use of post. In this chapter, we're going to actually continue with that design process by going through into the roof mode and adding roof framing members that will be exposed to the underside of the existing sunroom that's there now, as well as adding items such as solar panels and skylights. As we change into the second floor plan and we take a look at the roof that has been added from the second floor, referencing down to the first, you can see the outline of the roof as it pertains to the walls and even the small roof that was actually placed on between the existing roof and the new screened-in porch roof that is going to allow for runoff. As we begin by selecting Draw, you'll see that we've got in the ribbon menu skylights, and immediately to the right of that, solar panels. Solar panels are becoming much more acceptable and being used in many areas. And so if you are called to put these in, it's simply a matter of clicking the option for use and then using a two-click process where you sketch an expanding box onto the roof. You would be able to sketch these out. They would then be able to be dimensioned into place, and they will adhere to the default roof pitch, or you can modify them after the fact. So by clicking in the upper left hand corner after selecting the command and expanding the box from the upper left to the lower right and then clicking, at this stage we will add solar panels to the right roof plane. The edit menu on the left hand side opens up, allowing you to see things like height and width, which could both be dimensioned. To accurately set that up, you would be able to go in and specify things like tilt angles or the default of laying flat on the roof. The benefit to drawing this is not only can you view it inside the 3D model, but you would also be able to tack that into your bill of materials. A review inside the 3D shaded model will show us what we have. In the event that you wanted to dimension this into place, you at that time could then just simply take your cursor up to the dimension menu, select dimension from the ribbon bar, and then position your cursor in a placement point on the roof whereby you can click on the ridge line and run the cursor from left to right, and it will put the dimension in place. Likewise, you could do the vertical. At this stage now, these dimensions could be modified and changed. Take note that dimensions added within the roof mode will only appear in roof mode, so these dimensions would not carry over onto your drawing. And that's just important to note if you are printing drawings out from the same plan but in different modes. The dimensions will always adhere to the mode that they have been placed in. Erasing the solar panels from the roof, we can now go in and add the skylights to the drawing. And so to begin with, I'm just going to go in through the options and visible items, and inside this mode here, I'm actually going to turn the plate heights off. And the reason I'm basically doing this at this stage is just to remove some excess information that I don't necessarily need at this time. As I do that, I can now come in through the draw and skylight option from the ribbon bar, which will now allow me to position my cursor onto the drawing screen, click to begin, and sketch in a similar way as to what I did with the skylight option, a rectangular box. And the rectangular box will actually cut a hole at this stage through the roof and if there were a ceiling below in the similar way, so that we can actually have a skylight. If you're doing a three-dimensional model, you'll be able to view down or up and see through it. But on top of this, your bill of materials once again would be adjusted. These skylights can be moved about on the plan and can be edited once they have been placed, so that items such as length and width could also be modified on the actual drawing. This allows you to go in and accurately set up the size of what this is going to be, and then through the edit and repeat edit you can of course apply the exact same change. Similar to what we did with the solar panels, we can actually come in through the dimension command and run a dimension from the ridge down to the top of the frame of the actual skylight, and then modify that. And so in this case here, moving this so that they are both 1 foot 10 inches from the ridge line is going to allow us to accurately place them. Now pulling dimensions from the gable end to the front edge of the skylight, we can go in and now modify this just by right clicking and changing it. Of course, the skylight on the left is the one that we're a little more concerned about where it's placed, simply because we also have to worry about the runoff of that roof plane that's running down there. And so having set that dimension there, we can pop into 3D and just take a look. And at this stage now we can see that we've actually got the skylight on both roof planes. And as we zoom in using the zoom to surface command, we can actually see what we have. And so with the skylights actually modified, we can now go into the roof options from the ribbon bar. And at this stage here, down the left hand side, we can take a look at the roof framing dimensions. These dimensions, as they're set up at this stage, affect only the drawing itself. And so as we go in here, we can modify the individual roof spacing if we needed it to be something other than the default that's in there. We would also be able to go in and set up the rafter widths and depths. And because at this stage we're going to use the rafters to more represent a post and beam style construction, we're going to change the rafter widths and beef them up from 1.5 inches in width to 3.5 inches. We'll leave the rafter depth at what it is at this stage, at the 5.5 inches, which should be more than sufficient for what we're doing. And so once we have modified and added those dimension changes there, we can select OK, which would then allow us to now go in, select Draw, followed by Framing, and select the Auto Stick Frame option. Now when you select Auto Stick Frame, what it's going to do upon clicking on the roof is, using the default dimensions that we just selected, as well as the default spacings, it will go in and place those roof framing members on the varying roof planes. A quick check within 3D, where we can maneuver our camera into the screened in porch and then just simply scroll around and look up, is going to allow us to see what the framing members actually look like inside 3D. At this stage, based on the spacings, they've gone in and framed them accordingly, and so there may be a few modifications or changes that we'll want to do as far as this is concerned. Let's begin by selecting the move option, and what we would do is basically simply move these rafters and or beams so that they actually frame out in and around the skylights that we have on the roof. And so just by using the item erase, I basically removed one section of the broken beam, if you will, and then simply by selecting adjust item, I'll adjust this beam down to the exterior rafter that's running along the fascia line. Now at this stage right now, as I begin to put the framing into place, I can see that the roof as it stands right now, I'm just going to adjust a few of these rafters so that in essence they're running to the edge of the wall, and as opposed to into the existing house that's there. And so just using the adjust item feature, I can click the end of the rafter, drag it back to where I want to place it, and then click to set it down. A quick review back inside the 3D shows us how the roof is all being framed in at this time. Now, obviously what we're going to need to do is put the horizontal members, if you will, in to frame both the top and the bottom of the actual framed skylight that's there. And so by selecting the framing option and selecting the single rafter option, is simply click to start and click to finish. When I do that, what you're going to see is it actually, just its cleanup feature, snaps it from one end of the roof to the other. And so this is going to introduce for us the use of a soft plan design tool called the trim option. Using the tools and trim option, what I can actually do is set a cutting plane by clicking on the edge of the rafter that I want to remove. And once I've set that cutting plane up, by clicking there, I can then just click on the ends of the rafters that I wish to take out, and it will actually use that plane as where it snaps or cuts off the trim, or trims that rafter back to, so to speak. And so now with just a simple move command, I can get the rafters basically exactly where I want them to be. And this is going to show up inside the 3D for me nicely, and then also inside my bill of materials, as we've talked about. Taking just a quick look around, we can see exactly what we have to date. And so as we take a look at this gable end wall, we can see that the vertical members need to be adjusted up to the underside of the gable end, if you will. And so at this stage, just by selecting the rafter with the post with a right mouse click, I can adjust that up to the underside of the gable end rafter that's there, and click to set it down. Of course, we're going to need one in the middle, which isn't there because we have a door already set in place. And so what I would basically do at this stage is just copy one of the other posts that's already there. And I'm just going to do this by eye for right now, but I can just copy it into place and click to set it down. At this stage, again, using the adjust item feature, I would have the freedom to now select adjust item, select the top end of the post and adjust it to the underside of the beam, and then likewise do the same thing for the bottom end by simply adjusting it up to the top side of the load bearing beam that makes up our screened in porch. And so now we've managed to get ourselves our posts in place, and we're doing some of this just in 3D to suit. It's quite from a perspective of accuracy, we probably at some point would go back and maybe actually set the posts that are in the gable end as one post, and then stopping at the top of the beam and not running all the way through like we have right now. But visually at this stage, this will work for what we're attempting to do, and so we can save that and begin to now transition to looking at what we're going to do with the patio on the bottom. Having added the framing and skylights to the screened-in porch, the next half of this chapter is going to focus on a complex patio design that's going to take place down here in the back corner. And so as I zoom into this area in the site plan drawing, what I want to do is come in and basically sketch the outline of this shape. Selecting draw and site work, we have a series of polygon shapes that we can actually sketch. Picking patio would allow me to either select the line or spline option to trace. Selecting the line will allow me to now come in and freeform sketch a rectangular or rectangular-like shape onto the patio or onto the site. And so as I sketch this in, you can see at this stage I get the basic outline of a patio. And this patio, if I were to edit it, has three-dimensional properties that include depth, and the depth based on the perimeter will allow me to calculate area as well as volume. This site polygon, if I'm looking at it right now, will be placed in using basically a zero offset, and so right now it currently floats above the site, okay, and of course we have a sloping site. So if I were to edit this in plan view, I would then be able to fit this polygon to the sloping ground. As I do this, what you will see is it's actually going to slope this to follow the actual terrain, and so now we would actually have a sloping patio. Not necessarily what we want, but that just gives you the ability to see, if you were to liken this to a walkway or driveway, how you could actually slope it to follow the surface. If I edit this, okay, and simply come in and key in an offset of, say, let's give it a 6-inch offset down, okay, which will help it to keep this flat. As I do that, one of the things you're going to see is it actually cuts into the ground. So this tells us that we're going to need some stairs on this side, but then we may need a retaining wall over here in order to support the area beside the patio. Moving back to the site plan drawing at this stage, I'm going to adjust this line or this plane in, if you will, and simply now edit this edge. I can see the line length is 26 feet, and so here I'm going to now set this radius at 13 and reverse its center. And so what we can see now is I've created a curve all the way around for this actual polygon, and as I take a look at it, this is what we now have for the form or the shape. Ultimately, this, as I edit this, is going to become something other than a patio, but rather as a curb that we're going to place on this. But for the time being, we'll leave it as is for what its assignment is. The next step that I'd like to do is come in through Tools and pick Offset. I'm going to position my cursor on the polygon and move my cursor inside, where I can now set up how far inside I'm going to set up the copy of this shape. And so here I can set this for, just let's say 9 inches. That dimension is entirely up to me, and click OK, and I get a secondary polygon shape in there. For the time being, as that's the one that I wish to work with, I'm going to edit the outer polygon shape that is here, and I'm going to set its default layer to 1, and then turn that layer off. And so when I do that, I now only have the inner shape to work with. Here, I can now come in and I'm going to fillet these two edges, something like so, just to clean that corner up right there based on when I offset things in. Of course, at this point, what we wanted to do is actually step in an area here that is where the kitchen is going to be placed on the actual drawing itself. And so coming in using the miscellaneous and divide segments, I'm actually going to position my cursor here and run my cursor clear across to the other side and click and set this up for 3. And what this is going to do at this stage right now is place a series of construction points in there for me, which I can then dimension to, okay, as far as the setting up where my placement points are going to be for this option. I'm also going to come in through the explode option under miscellaneous and explode this shape at this point into a series of lines. That's going to make it easier for me to modify and manipulate, what I'm trying to do. What I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to adjust this arc out of the way for just a moment. This is going to allow me to come in using the dimension point and now dimension between each of these construction points that we have here. And I can now edit this, and I'm going to set this up at, let's say, 1'6", and that's basically what I'm likening this to is laying stakes out for where I want areas to be. And so what I'm basically setting this up to do is have a 7-foot kitchen area in here with 1'6" on either side. And so as I begin to adjust this back now all the way back to this corner, I now have what I'm looking at as far as my area here. Okay, and so what I will do is come in using the erase and block cut, and I'm going to block cut out this area of the arc. And so I've broken this into 2 now, which will allow me to select the draw, site work, patio, and line. And I may even take out these dimensions at this stage and just be able to come in and now draw in these without having to be encumbered by having the dimensions and so on in place. And so as I do that, I'm now creating this little cutout in here. And I could set dimensions up, or in this case, I'm just going to move this according to, what I think I want, the actual dimensions to look like. So picking adjust, I can adjust this polygon and set that up. Now, once I've done this, I'll select the edit, form block polygon, and sketch a box completely around that shape. Having used the form polygon command for this at this stage, as I edit this, I'll be able to see, what my options look like for it. So it is a patio. I'll be able to set that offset, and change it to suit as we get there. If I come in and turn on the default layer, I can add the other patio option that I have. Inside the 3D, we can see the two patios coexisting. And so if I were to right click and edit the outer patio, I would be able to go in here and modify this and maybe change this to a different material altogether. We see its offset as being 6 inches down, as far as the drawing is concerned. And so I will click OK on that, and I'll edit the interior patio at this stage, and I'm going to give it an offset of 5.875 inches down, so that it's protruding just by a smidge. It's an eighth of an inch. It's not even going to be seen, but by having those, and it keeps them both horizontal on the relative to the site. And so as I take a look at this now, I've got my complex patio look, or that we're looking for 3D. Okay, again, we're going to work with this if we need to in order to get a retaining wall running around the outside, and then we will step up this section here to get up to the flat patio that we're going to have up on the top. So with that said and done, the next step that we may want to do then is to come in and add the secondary patio that's going to take place. So the next option will be to come in and possibly place a stair here in order to get up to the area that we want to add another patio, okay, and perhaps even some sort of retaining wall along the back edge here. Coming into the site plan, I'm actually just going to continue the use of the curb option that we have here, and so selecting draw, site work, and curb, I'll have the option of coming in here and setting up what the width of this is going to be. So we will type in, let's say, 12 inches. We're going to do an exaggerated or large step up, if you will, and click OK. I'm going to zoom this area up here, and I've actually turned the snap feature off, and I'm just going to sketch this along the straight line that's here. And then right click. When I do this, I can actually edit this curve, and I'll be able to modify, there's the width, but also modify what the depth is going to be. And so in this case, modifying that to 7.5 inches, I can take a look at this and we can see we've added a step in there. And so at this stage now, I'm setting this up so that we can, at this stage, begin to create a patio that's going to take place up here, something like so. And so I'm just moving this relative to where I want it to be with the existing patio. And ultimately, as I say, we may wind up coming in and placing a retaining wall there. So within the site plan at this stage, I could now go ahead and begin to sketch in the rest of where my patio is going to be in a similar fashion to what we did over here. Using the site work, patio, and sketch. Some of this is just going to be free-formed in, very much like a design, if you will. And so I'm just going to begin my sketch option in the corner there. And I'm now just going to, using the F12 function key, just begin to sketch things out following some of the outline of the actual deck and patio that we have on the drawing already. And so at this stage now, I may just run the cursor across and do something like so. And so once I have traced the entire outline of the patio, which I get here, I can then edit this patio edge in a similar way to what we've done already in this session, and I can go in and begin to modify this to fit to the site, and I can also edit the individual edges, which would then allow me to go in and set up what the radius is going to be if I wanted to curve or change this. And so you can see, depending on what I do as far as the dimensions are concerned, I can, the greater the radius, the gentler the curve is going to be on this option. And so again, I'll edit this edge here, and looking at the 20-foot line, I'm just going to come in here and modify that to perhaps have a 15 or even 20-foot radius, again, to soften some of the curves that we're going to place on here. And so all of this is completely up to you, the user, as you define this into the plan. And over time, we'll be able to go in and add curbs and so on in a similar way to what was done over here. And so over time, 2 steps could be added using the curbs. We can have the patio with the outside perimeter in the exact same way that this is done. And as we take a look at it inside 3D, we can see the steps going up. We have the curb or the pour running around with the patio in between. And so all of this can be done within the actual drawing. And so over time, the outer perimeter using the offset tool could also be added in the same way that it was done over here. Multiple steps can be added using a curb option or polygon once again. And as we take a look at it inside the 3D shaded, we can see basically the outline and perimeter and what we've got. The actual curb itself, we can modify and change the depth to basically thicken it up in order to meet where the site is actually going to be on the actual drawing itself. And so this brings to a close where we're at as far as creating the site itself. In the next class, we're going to go in and take a look at creating the actual kitchen for the outdoor, including a pergola, and some of the use of symbols and such. We'll add in some planting beds just to help finish out some of the outdoor landscaping that we're going to be putting in there. And then we'll begin to look ahead to how we can set this up in a mode that's beyond shaded, but actually taking a look at texture assignments and so on. We'll see you next time.